everything that we do in government is a trade-off. It really is a trade-off. And so it's a matter of, so we'll just talk about healthcare is a good example. Healthcare is so highly regulated that it almost doesn't matter which section you're talking about, whether it be insurance, whether it be pharmaceuticals, whether it be, your hospital. They are so highly regulated that whenever you try to tweak it, it's going to tweak something else. And I've discovered this, that if you're going to address like pharmaceuticals and some of the things that happen there. So for instance, the use of patents to be able to protect a profit margin, things like that, where you're trying to tweak it, but then they're shifting costs. And I think, in my opinion, healthcare, so many of our industries, when they face huge amounts of regulation,
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. If you're someone who's interested in history, you'll hopefully like this episode, because our guest today not only talks about history and is well steeped in history, but he made history as part of the 1960s civil rights movement. So before we get to him, I want to bring in engineer Matt to talk about some of the cool historical places that he's been and been able to visit. Matt, tell me about, like I said, I'm excited to talk to Clarence about his participation in history. Some of us haven't been as active in major historical events, but we've seen a lot of cool stuff that reminds us of our history as Americans. What's some of the stuff you've seen?
Oh, well, for one, traveling with this show gets you out and seeing awesome historical stuff all the time. And we had some really cool opportunities to, well, for example, we did go to Philadelphia. That was very historical and cool. And then I might have mentioned this once before on the show, I am a little bit of a World War II history buff, and I really enjoyed visiting the battleship New Jersey, and they've got it as a museum now. It's a really cool, one of the last great World War II battleships. That was neat. And then we got to film not too long ago at a World War II destroyer right in front of it on the pier there. Yeah. So that was cool. That was the USS Orleck. So for me, being a little bit of a World War II history guy, those are really fun for me.
No, that's cool. I love it because there's so many different eras. That's one of the fun things about enjoying history. I've always loved history. It's what got me involved and interested in politics. I can't believe it when my kids don't love history. I'm like, no, this documentary really is cool. We should go to this place. But, for me, some of the highlights, I've been to the Alamo down in San Antonio, which is kind of cool. The story of the Alamo is cool. It's certainly, like everyone always says, it's smaller than you realize. But it was pretty cool to be like, all right, this is the Alamo, pretty iconic. A lot of sites in Virginia. I've been to, in Richmond, seeing places like, like the old state capitol. The state capitol in Virginia is pretty cool because, Jefferson designed it. You wander around Virginia, you just bump into places. I grew up near Morristown, where George Washington's headquarters was during the Revolutionary War. And then, recently we were up in Boston, and saw where the Boston Tea Party was, and went to the tavern where the Sons of Liberty were formed, and went to Cheers.
So you can't forget that part.
Maybe not quite the same, but it's still good times.
There's a little difference in the level of history between, the Tea Party and Cheers, but I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, our guest today has lived in a pretty amazing life and made a lot of, history. So very interested in talking to him. Saving money is something we all try to do, right? Whether it's finding coupons, waiting for something to go on sale, or just try not to spend more than we have to. So let's imagine if a state government actually tried to do the same. There are some states that actually have put mechanisms in place that if a regulation costs a certain amount, the state legislature has to vote on it, which is, that's a pretty good way of keeping things in check. So as some states are reviewing new regulations, others are taking a look at the regulations they already have to see if changes need to be made. One state, Virginia, has an Office of Regulatory Management, which has generated a significant amount in annual savings. But this office could end up going away due to a change in the governorship and state leadership. Let's talk about what's going on with our guest today, who represents Virginia's 61st District, Delegate Michael Webert. Delegate, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you guys are in the fight. I know there's been a lot of changes in leadership in Virginia over the last year plus, and that resulted in, some real challenges for those of us who value, more liberty and free markets and less spending. But so I'm very interested to hear kind of about what's been going on specifically around the regulatory fights. But before we get to that, you're a farmer.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe give us a little bit of your background as to how your family came to be farming, and what that has been like, and how that's led you to running for office too.
Well, so I guess it kind of leads how I came into office in general. I as a young kid, my first business was basically running a custom hay operation. We went around and picked up square bales and threw them on a wagon and stacked them for the local farmers in the area. And it was really funny because I never visited a weight room during football season. I was always working, the typical farm kid, corn-fed farmer. And then my grandmother, when I had taken a leave, I guess, from college for a little bit, and went back, was living on my grandmother's farm on our main farm, and decided to give it a go and take over and manage it. And we were in the Angus business. That's how I met my wife, and just kind of grew the business over time. And then the seat came open, and I was asked to run, partly because I've been so involved in the community, Farm Bureau, our local livestock exchange, and all that stuff. And then also, and just to kind of segue into regulatory reform, I still remember my first jaunt to go into DC to lobby was really to say, hey, we have so many regulations that are so burdensome on us. We need to shrink it, but we also, please just leave us alone. Is kind of where how I got started in it. And that's where we got into the regulatory reform. And ORM, the Office of Regulatory Management, that Governor Youngkin put in place, is really an extension of House Bill, I think it was 833, that we passed. I was the patron, but we passed it under the Northam administration with the then Speaker Cox's leadership on that too. And it was the largest regulatory reform that the Commonwealth had ever seen. And it really focused on the Department of Office and Regulatory Management and licensing. And it all, transpired with the great think tanks like the Mercatus Center, ALEC, AFP, basically looking at everything and going, okay, how can we strengthen the burdensome regulations that are in the Commonwealth, and the regulatory requirements? How many forms do we have to fill out just to be able to do something in the United States now, And so that's how we got started. And Governor Youngkin really, really latched onto that. And I will tell you that the Office of Regulatory Management and the regulatory reform that he undertook at Department of Environmental Quality really has saved the taxpayers an immense amount of money. I think they calculated it out for the cost of a house. I think just from the regulatory reform that they underwent at DEQ was a savings of about $26,000 for a house.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's real calculated money.
Yeah.
That people are saving buying houses due to regulatory reform. That's a great way to bring it home to people, so to speak.
Well, you mentioned in your introduction that, what is the cost of regulations. And I think to me, that's also, it kind of counts as a hidden tax sometimes. It just adds to the inflation of the cost of goods. And, while government is there to be a referee and also help, make sure that things are done safely and things like that, at times I do believe that the bureaucrats are just trying to keep their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. We've talked a lot about regulatory issues on the show, and I remember talking to the head of the Farm Bureau up in Pennsylvania, and he's a hog farmer, and he was talking to us about some specific things with regard to it and how it just impacts every part of his business and other farmers that he's talking to. So, like in your life, your day job as a farmer, like how have you seen regulation impact your business?
Oh, so I still remember this was the Obama rule, the waters of the U.S. when they were trying to expand waters of the U.S. We brought out folks from EPA and some of the just the rule makers, and said, look, if the rule goes through as written, I lose this much ground. And by the way, I mean we're in a drought now. That's acres that I wouldn't be able to graze. The other thing too is, and I'll tell the story because it was literally this morning. So I bought a new tractor, first piece of new equipment we've purchased in a long time, and it's an expensive piece of equipment, right? So, but it also has the DEF fluid with it, and so if it's a diesel engine, any diesel like your on-road diesel engines, they have DEF fluid, and it helps clean the what's coming out of the exhaust, right? And so they've taken to the point where now they do this on the tractors for cleaner environment. But what we've discovered is on a brand new tractor, the DEF fluid, we're burning through DEF fluid. So not only that, do you add an extra $10,000 to $15,000 for the engine, you have an extra basically added cost because I have to buy this DEF fluid, which is basically urea, and have to add it in order to scrub the exhaust on a tractor. And the tractor's not nearly as efficient. My 1992 tractor, I can fill up and it will run for a week. And to be honest, I bet you it probably emits the same. And that's just that's the cost of overregulating, overburdening things, trying to accomplish a goal that is just adding to the cost of doing business. We see it all the time.
Yeah, we hear about it across the country. I mean, I've talked to folks in Alaska, folks in Wyoming, Utah, and it's all the different shapes and sizes. It's at the federal level, it's at the state level, it's the local level. And we talked to guys who have food trucks in Georgia, and they're talking about it and how they can't do business. They're trying, and all of it does not seem commonsensical. It feels like if everybody could just kind of go with the smell test or do something that's commonsensical, we'd be a lot better off. Maybe I'm just naive that way. But you guys have been trying to, I think the reform you guys made over the last decade in Virginia and what you're trying to preserve has really been effective. The number you said, what, 26,000 per home saved due to streamlined regulation is pretty phenomenal. So maybe talk to me a little bit more about the Office of Regulatory Management and what it actually does to save money.
So basically, when I was talking about the first bit of reform that we did, one of the big feedbacks that we got was that there was a lot of busy work in trying to identify those regulations and things like that, and it would be really nice to have it housed in one spot and have one or two people that their whole job is to focus on regulatory reform, collect all the data, work on trying to streamline those things. And so Governor Youngkin took that to heart and said, okay, we're gonna create the office. And then what they did too is they also started using artificial intelligence in order to go through the code and identify needless regulation. But then they also took away that busy work and the executive branch in order to expand it along the entire executive branch. And then he also had cabinet secretaries like Mike Webert, and who has been so involved in water. Mike Rollban's first business was water conservation, stream bank fencing, things like that. And so he is the master at this stuff. And so what he did was he started streamlining things along with the Office of Regulatory Management. They work together. This is the best example. They work together and figured out that if they could streamline the permitting process and make it faster, not only are they just making it easier on business in general, but they're making it faster. And we all know that time is money. And then also just lowering the identifying duplicative regulations and things like that, then what they did was they took away that burden on business. Business was able to function faster. They were able to function with a whole lot less burden, i.e., manpower trying to, go along with the regulations. I think that's where you see a big savings if you could really streamline some regulation. I don't know what you've seen across the country, but from what I've talked to with some of my colleagues, when you have a business that's no longer having to dedicate 5 lawyers to just, making sure that they comply with things, that frees up a whole lot of economic empowerment that business can use in order to grow. And I think that's a great thing.
Now, I think we can all agree that fewer lawyers might be better.
So when I came in, I'll tell a story. When I came in, my predecessor was a lawyer, and he later became a judge. But one of my colleagues, he was throwing a fundraiser, and he said, anytime you can replace a lawyer with a farmer, it's a good day in the General Assembly.
It's America moving in the right direction.
Right? Yeah. And at one point, I was the only one. Now I've got a couple newer colleagues that also are in the cattle business too. But I just, we talk about regulations, we talk about taxes. I'll bring up Virginia, the what we are about to embark on, which is probably one of the dumbest things we can do, which is that we are about to enter into RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, where we have to pay for the carbon energy that we are producing. Meanwhile, we're also a carbon importer. You mentioned Pennsylvania; they were at least smart enough not to join, but we just went through the new auction with RGGI. And it was I think it was $35 for a credit when in 2020, when Governor Youngkin wisely said we're not going to participate, it was like 12 or not even. Yeah, I think it was about 12. So now you're looking at if those prices stay just to comply with RGGI, you're looking at about $800 million tax on the ratepayers of the Commonwealth of Virginia just to comply.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's just, we've been involved with, kind of fighting RGGI in particularly New England states, obviously Virginia, but Virginia, Governor Youngkin kind of did the good thing there. And I mean, even, very liberal, left-leaning New England states even decided not to go along with it at times. They usually get pressured into it, but it's just, why? We're just costing taxpayers so much more money. It's unbelievable.
Well, not only that, but I discovered, the whole goal is to shrink carbon emissions, right? But what I've discovered too is you have entities that are participating in these auctions that don't produce power. All they're there to do is buy up the allotments so that the price goes higher, to make it more painful, so we don't have our carbon emitting, generation. But the problem is, part of the reason our power bills are going up is because we don't have what I call dispatchable generation. And it's because of the environmental regulations that the Democrats imposed in 2020 with the Virginia Clean Economy Act, along with, Maryland and New Jersey and those states that also imposed all of those regulations. And so now we're importing all of our, a lot of our energy. And the energy that when it's 20 below, extreme example, but you go into your house and you turn on your heat, and you turn on your light, it needs to work. And that energy is more expensive because solar, it doesn't produce power at night. So that's just yet another example of what overburdensome regulation does to the average citizen.
Well, in Virginia, it's even working against Virginians and working against yourselves. And all the way down to the point of that, Western Virginia has plenty of natural resources and energy producing businesses and lots of great resources that can help Virginians and other people. I mean, it's a boon to the economy, but like you keep trying to penalize it, it's not going to be able to stay forever.
Well, and you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And it punishes those parts of Virginia. And then we also have the other issue where the Democrats would like to see, huge land masses covered in solar so that they can feel good about turning on their lights. And the problem is, for me, it's, well, where are we going to grow our food? And, my constituents don't want to see all of their land in solar. They want to see a beautiful vista of the Blue Ridge and the historical landmarks that make Virginia what it is. You know,
So the new governor, and you went through your first legislative session. I know you guys fended off a lot of attacks or, bad policy. And there's been an attempt to dismantle some of the good policy that had been passed in the previous administration. I imagine the next legislative session's another fight, and then some. What, with regard to the regulatory regimen you guys have in place, which seems to have been, very successful, what do you think's the future there?
personally, I think under the current administration, as well as the fact that the Democrats have the trifecta, they have a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. I would venture to say that a large portion of our regulatory reform is going to disappear. I think that the governor, so for instance, uh, I forget I call him the energy czar. Um, which is a new position. She's already added to the bureaucracy. You've got a director of the of energy already, and now she's added an energy czar whose sole goal is to make energy more affordable. But everything that they've done has made energy more expensive. Um, I think in their effort to accomplish their altruistic goals, we're just going to see an influx of regulation. And their biggest thing is they want to take away local control of everything, so that a locality can't say, "Hey, we are a steward of the taxpayer dollars. If we put housing here, we put industry here, we put industry here. This is where we're going to have all of the infrastructure for it." Um, they're taking that away, and it's going to be and it's only for certain things. They're going to pick and choose that. They're going to say, okay, housing, you can build wherever you want. Well, now what are you going to do when you have to put in a highway? Where are your tax dollars going to go for that? And while we would like to see some regulatory reform in that, we still need some local zoning to know that we can say, okay, we're going to put all our industry here, which we have. My house is just up from an industrial area, and now they're working and building it out now. But I think what you're going to have particularly is, so they want to do a great thing. They want to lower regulations on housing, but then they also do the same thing and say, well, you have to keep all the old trees, or you have to have X number of canopy, or you have it's those types of things that when they add up, all of a sudden that $26,000 that the governor just saved is gone when it comes to the housing regulations.
So when you listen to your colleagues across the aisle and they're proposing, kind of dismantling what's been very positive, streamlining regulations, is there one set of argument, or what's the line of justification from them?
I think everybody lives in a silo. I mean, I think they're looking at their area. They're looking in Northern Virginia, and they're saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. We have these issues, so we're going to put in all these regulations, and that the problem is that also negatively affects the rest of the state. And then you also forget that, there's a whole set of federal regulations when it comes to this. So I think one of the best examples of regulatory reform a very small example, but it's a very good example, is the fact that in Virginia now, when you're looking at some of these older buildings like that have storefronts on the bottom, like on Old Main Street, you've got storefront on the bottom, but you have apartments up top. We no longer regulate 2 staircases. going more towards Europe where you can have one staircase. Because if you were to redevelop that and you need two staircases, you just added $100,000 to that project. And so, it's looking at that and going, okay, we need to do that. We've got a couple of Democrats that are willing to look at stuff like that, but then others that they're not. They're okay. You've got to make sure you maintain 20% of the tree canopy when you're redeveloping an area. You've got to, make sure that certain regulations are there, stormwater regulations are there. That's where the Department of Environmental Quality made a lot of headway, was in stormwater regulations. They streamlined it, but yet here we are adding more credits, adding more this and that to the cost of it. And I don't think they realize that it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think a lot of people are well-meaning and are like, well, what about this? What about this? But everything is a trade-off, and everything comes at a cost. I do think that there are some folks who don't share our worldview who really do want to control things and want to use the regulatory process to kind of impose their view of the world. I think Reggie goes towards that, for instance. When you talk about, carbon tax credits and stuff. I think there's a desire to control behavior on the part of some. But I think a lot of times it's people looking at just their own little slice of the pie and saying, oh, well, we can make things better this way and make things better this way, rather than entrusting the people to make things as good, acting out of self-interest, trying to make them as good as they could be. It's kind of a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach.
I agree. And you mentioned trade-offs. The interesting thing about it is everything that we do in government is a trade-off. It really is a trade-off. And so it's a matter. So we'll just talk about healthcare. It's a good example. Healthcare is so highly regulated that it almost doesn't matter which section you're talking about, whether it be insurance, whether it be pharmaceuticals, whether it be, your hospital. They are so highly regulated that whenever you try to tweak it, it's going to tweak something else. And I've discovered this, that, if you're going to address like pharmaceuticals and some of the things that happen there. So for instance, the use of patents to be able to protect a profit margin, things like that, where you're trying to tweak it, but then they're shifting costs. And I think, in my opinion, healthcare, so many of our industries, when they face huge amounts of regulation, the only people that can really survive are the big guys, because that's where you're seeing this massive consolidation of companies. And it's because you end up, the little guy isn't allowed to thrive because they can't overcome the regulatory burden that's put in front of them just to get started. It's like licensing. Licensing can be just a huge barrier to entry when it comes to certain industries. The regulatory reform that we passed in 2018, I think is a perfect example. I think at that point, cosmetology, it was 390 hours to get your license or something, and now they're down to like 300, a little less. But that's a perfect example. We had so many things that would come. Oh well, a hair braider needed a cosmetology license, and then we were like, okay, well no, they're just braiding hair. It's like, well, why don't we take a look at the whole thing and say, okay, why can't a person voluntarily enter the marketplace and say, I'm really good at braiding hair, and have people pay them for it? Instead, the state says, oh no, you need a cosmetology license.
Because of all the risks involved with hair braiding.
Exactly. Exactly.
Seriously.
That's you see those types of examples everywhere. And I think that's where the Office of Regulatory Management under Youngkin came in, was such a good example of innovation, in that that's its sole purpose. When you have an office and like that, and their sole purpose is to look at all that stuff and say, yeah, we don't really need that. I think that's a good thing. And if they can do it bureaucratically as opposed to through the legislature, that makes things even easier. Because as you mentioned, I believe there are people that want to use the regulatory process to, impose their worldview on the way we do things. And, if you have an office like Youngkin did, they kind of can nick that in the bud, kind of speak.
Yeah. Well, it strikes me that, the regulatory stuff often isn't the sexy issue that people want to talk about, but it's kind of the meat and potatoes that when you do it right, you end up with more affordable housing. You end up with business unleashed. You allow entrepreneurship. And so often it's the little guy. I mean, the giant companies and super wealthy folks can afford all the lawyers and accountants and engineers that you need. It's the startup, the person just trying to start out who's over licensed and over regulated, who just gets crushed under the weight of over regulation and can't make it. And so, I do hope that Virginia does not backslide on this, because I think that there's been a good culture created there. And man, I think about America's 250th birthday, and it's, no Virginia's, top of the heap when it comes to states that have a great legacy and have something to say about, the Declaration and the principles that are enshrined in it. And I'd love to see Virginia continue to lead the way.
I mean, as would I. I think you pointed out this. It's the small guy. I mean, look at the companies that started out in a garage and are now are multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies, and part of that is because the world hadn't tried to regulate them at all, and all of a sudden you have this massive business that was created in a garage, or a guy who decided that one day he would just go out on his own as a plumber, and all of a sudden now he's got a massive business running 150 trucks and a few hundred employees, and he's just doing well. And that's the kind of American exceptionalism that we want to see. And as you brought up the 250th anniversary in Virginia, because we kind of created everything. I'm a little partial.
I've heard that before. Whenever I'm in Virginia,
I'm a little partial. I mean, I like to point out that Sam Houston was a Virginian, so every time I see Texans, I'm like, "We're your father."
That's awesome.
So, but I'd love for the governor to be able to do that. I think, particularly now with the drama that we've seen within the Democrats, that I'm hoping that she actually returns to, or does what she says when she was talking about moderation. She wanted to be. She kept saying that she was this moderate Democrat. Her campaign kept saying that she was moderate Democrat, and all of a sudden she went super left with our redistricting issues and that kind of thing. But I'm hoping that at least with all of this drama, she can go, you know what, regulatory reform is one of those things that we can work together on. I mean, for me personally, it's, as you say, it's the meat and potatoes, and I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I do farm. Throw a big steak on there, and I'm even better.
Literally a meat guy.
Yeah, I'm literally a meat guy. So it's like, okay, let's work on that, because that truly you don't see it immediately. You see it 2 to 3 years later when it's actually making businesses' lives easier, your constituent lives easier, and they're able to have a little bit more money in their pocket.
Yeah, well, I wish you the best in the fight. I know that you're, like I said, the folks are kind of unaligned or controlling things now, but you've been putting up a good fight. So I think hopefully as we keep showing the benefits to Virginians of a streamlined regulatory process, and people, hopefully everybody wants more affordability for folks. So I wish you the best in kind of prosecuting this fight.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. We need all the help we can get too. So
yeah. Well, Delegate, thanks a lot. And I hope that the America's 250th is probably nowhere better to celebrate than Virginia. So I hope it's a wonderful time for everybody.
Thank you. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, freedom and liberty are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.